Welcome to our deep dive into the Vietnam War, where we uncover some of the most shocking and remarkable aspects of this tumultuous period in history. The Vietnam War, a conflict that once felt half a world away, left an indelible scar not just on the landscapes of Southeast Asia, but also on the American psyche. Over the next hour, we will journey through jungles and rice paddies, through firefights and protest marches, to understand the events that shaped a generation and continue to resonate today. Brace yourself for a journey through events that shook the world and left an indelible mark on history. March 16th, 1968. Dawn breaks over the village of My Lai in South Vietnam. What began as a routine search and destroy mission quickly descended into a scene of unimaginable horror. Company C, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade of the American Division entered the village expecting Viet Cong resistance. They found none. Instead, they encountered unarmed villagers, men, women, children, going about their daily routines. What transpired over the next 4 hours was not a battle, but a massacre. Between 347 and 504 unarmed Vietnamese civilians were systematically murdered by American soldiers. The air, thick with the stench of gunpowder and death, was punctuated by the screams of the innocent. The My Lai massacre, as it came to be known, sent shockwaves through the world. It became a chilling symbol of the war's brutality and the moral complexities that entangled those who fought in it. The cover-up that followed further eroded public trust in the government and fueled the growing anti-war movement. The year is 1970. America is a nation divided. The war in Vietnam, once a distant conflict, has come home. On college campuses across the country, students are rising up in protest, their voices echoing the growing dissent against the war. Kent State University in Ohio becomes a focal point of this unrest. On May 4th, a student protest against the expansion of the Vietnam War into Cambodia turns deadly. The Ohio National Guard, deployed to maintain order, opens fire on the unarmed students. The staccato bursts of gunfire cut through the air, leaving 4 students dead and 9 wounded. The blood of young Americans spilled on American soil becomes a chilling testament to the deep divisions within the nation. The Kent State shootings sent shockwaves across the country. The images of the slain students, frozen in time, became a searing indictment of the war and its devastating impact on American society. The nation mourned, and the anti-war movement gained even greater momentum. As the war in Vietnam escalated, so too did the need for manpower. The Selective Service System, better known as the draft, became the government's tool for conscripting young men into military service. For many working-class families, the draft was unavoidable. Their sons, many barely old enough to shave, were sent halfway across the world to fight in a war they barely understood. But the draft was not applied equally. College deferments and other loopholes allowed wealthier, more privileged young men to avoid service. This inequity fueled the flames of discontent, particularly among African Americans who were disproportionately represented on the front lines. Resistance to the draft took many forms. Young men burned their draft cards in acts of defiance. Others fled to Canada or sought conscientious objector status. The draft became a symbol of the war's deep unpopularity and the social and racial inequalities it exposed. Chapter 4: Operation Rolling Thunder, a campaign of destruction. In the skies above Vietnam, a different kind of war was being waged. Operation Rolling Thunder, the sustained aerial bombardment campaign launched by the United States in 1965, represented a new chapter in the conflict. For 3 long years, American bombers rained down a relentless torrent of explosives on North Vietnam. The stated goal was to cripple the enemy's war effort, but the reality on the ground was far more devastating. Villages were reduced to rubble, fields and forests were scorched black. Millions of innocent civilians were caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered by the relentless bombing. The air itself seemed to crackle with the constant thunder of explosions. Operation Rolling Thunder, despite its massive scale, failed to achieve its objectives. It did, however, leave an indelible scar on the Vietnamese landscape and psyche. The human cost of the campaign was staggering, and it served as a grim reminder of the indiscriminate nature of modern warfare. Chapter 5. The Pentagon Papers. Truth Revealed. June of 1971. America is transfixed by a series of articles published in the New York Times. The articles are based on a top-secret study of US involvement in Vietnam, a study that the government desperately wanted to keep hidden. These documents, known as the Pentagon Papers, revealed the truth about the war. A truth that had been concealed from the American people for years. They exposed a pattern of government deception, of misleading statements about the war's progress and the true nature of American involvement. The Pentagon Papers showed that the government had systematically lied to its citizens, manipulating public opinion to justify a war that many believed was unwinnable and unjust. The revelations sent shockwaves through the nation, further eroding public trust in the government and fueling the anti-war movement. The publication of the Pentagon Papers marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. It confirmed what many had long suspected, that the government had not been truthful about the war. Chapter 6. Agent Orange. A toxic legacy. The Vietnam War was a conflict fought not just with bullets and bombs, but with chemical weapons that left a devastating legacy for generations to come. Agent Orange, a potent herbicide, was sprayed by the US military over vast swathes of Vietnamese countryside. The goal was to defoliate the dense jungle, depriving the Viet Cong of cover and food sources. But Agent Orange's effects went far beyond defoliation. The chemical, laced with dioxin, seeped into the soil and water, poisoning the land and its people. Birth defects skyrocketed in the years following the war. Generations of Vietnamese children were born with severe deformities, their lives forever altered by the war's toxic legacy. The use of Agent Orange stands as a chilling reminder of the long-term consequences of chemical warfare and the devastating impact it can have on innocent lives. April 30th, 1975. Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, is in chaos. The North Vietnamese army is closing in, and the city is on the verge of collapse. At the US Embassy, a scene of desperation unfolds. American personnel and Vietnamese civilians who had aided the US crowd the embassy grounds, desperate to escape the advancing communist forces. Helicopters whir overhead, ferrying evacuees to waiting aircraft carriers offshore. The image of a Chinook helicopter perched precariously on the roof of the US Embassy, its blades churning the air as desperate souls clamor aboard, becomes an enduring symbol of the war's chaotic end. The fall of Saigon marked the end of the Vietnam War and the beginning of a new chapter in Vietnamese history. For the United States, it was a bitter defeat, a blow to its prestige and a source of national trauma. Chapter 8. Justice or Retribution? War Crimes Trials. In the aftermath of the Vietnam War, America grappled with the legacy of its actions. The atrocities committed during the conflict, from My Lai to the indiscriminate bombing campaigns, raised profound questions about accountability and justice. War crimes trials became a focal point of this national reckoning. Soldiers once hailed as heroes were now facing charges for their roles in wartime atrocities. The most prominent of these trials was that of Lieutenant William Calley, charged with murder for his role in the My Lai massacre. Calley's conviction, though later commuted, exposed the dark underbelly of the war and the moral dilemmas faced by soldiers on the ground. The war crimes trials, while controversial, represented an attempt to hold individuals accountable for their actions and to address the moral complexities of the war. They were a reminder that even in the fog of war, there are lines that cannot be crossed. Chapter 9: Lost Treasures. Destruction of Cultural Heritage. The Vietnam War was not just a conflict between armies, it was a war that ravaged a nation's cultural heritage. Ancient temples, centuries-old pagodas, and irreplaceable artifacts fell victim to the relentless bombing and shelling. In the ancient city of Hue, once a center of Vietnamese culture and learning, historic buildings were reduced to rubble during the Tet Offensive. The citadel, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was heavily damaged, its once imposing walls scarred by battle. The destruction of cultural heritage in Vietnam was a tragedy not just for the Vietnamese people, but for all of humanity. It was a stark reminder that war is not just about military objectives. It is about the destruction of a people's history, identity, and soul. Chapter 10: The Vietnam Syndrome, a nation haunted. The Vietnam War cast a long shadow over American foreign policy. The term Vietnam Syndrome emerged to describe the nation's reluctance to engage in foreign interventions after the trauma of Vietnam. The war's legacy of military defeat, political division, and moral ambiguity made policymakers hesitant to commit American troops to foreign conflicts. The fear of another quagmire, another unwinnable war fought far from home, weighed heavily on the national psyche. The Vietnam Syndrome had a profound impact on American foreign policy. It led to a more cautious approach to international affairs, a greater emphasis on diplomacy, and a reluctance to use military force except as a last resort. The war's lessons, though painful, were not forgotten. They served as a constant reminder of the human cost of conflict and the need for careful consideration before committing American lives and resources to foreign entanglements. Outro: The Echoes of War. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey through the Vietnam War's most shocking and remarkable aspects. We have confronted the horrors of My Lai, the turmoil of Kent State, the environmental devastation of Agent Orange, and the enduring legacy of a war that continues to shape our world. The Vietnam War was a tragedy for all involved. It was a conflict that exacted a heavy toll on both the victors and the vanquished. But it was also a conflict that forced America to confront uncomfortable truths about itself, about its role in the world, and about the limits of its power. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most pivotal moments. Let us remember the lessons of the past so that we may build a more peaceful and just future.